Sachi woke up early that morning. The sun had barely risen, but he was ready to start his work day. Sachi was a taxi driver, and he loved his job. Before leaving the house, Sachi looked at Akumar's photo on the table next to her bed. Akumar was his fiancée, and Sachi loved her very much. He smiled, thinking about how beautiful she looked in her nurse's uniform. Sachi had a dream. He wanted Akumar to become a nurse. That's why he worked hard every day. All the money he earned, he saved to pay for Akumar's school. In the taxi, Sachi hummed softly as he drove through the city streets. He liked to see people coming and going, each with their own story. Someday, Sachi thought, Akumar will be the best nurse in town, and we will get married and have a happy family. After a long day of work, Sachi picked Akumar up from nursing school. When he saw her leaving the building, his heart beat faster. Akumar looked beautiful, with her shiny black hair and her sweet smile. How was your day? Sachi asked, as Akumar got into the taxi. Akumar sighed. It was tiring, Sachi. We had a lot of classes today. Sachi took Akumar's hand and gave it a soft kiss. Don't worry, my love. Soon you'll graduate and everything will get easier. Akumar smiled, but Sachi noticed that there was something different in his eyes. She looked sad? Concerned? Sachi couldn't say. On the way home, Akumar told Sachi about a friend's wedding she had gone to over the weekend. It was so beautiful, Sachi, Akumar said, his eyes shining. There were flowers everywhere, and the bride wore a beautiful dress. She looked like a princess. Sachi smiled, happy to see Akumar excited. But a small worry began to grow in his heart. He knew he couldn't give Akumar such a beautiful wedding. When they got home, Sachi prepared a simple dinner for them. As they ate, he noticed that Akumar was quiet, thoughtful. What's wrong, my love? Sachi asked. Are you worried about something? Akumar looked at Sachi, his eyes full of doubt. Sachi, do you think that one day we will have a life like that? Like the wedding I saw? Sachi felt her heart sink. He wanted so much to give Akumar all the best. But he knew he was just a taxi driver. Akumar, Sachi said, holding her hand. I can't promise a wedding full of flowers and expensive dresses. But I promise I will work hard every day to make you happy. Akumar smiled, but Sachi saw that the smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, after Akumar went to sleep, Sachi lay awake, thinking. He looked at his hands, calloused from working so hard. Was it enough? Would Akumar be happy with the simple life he could offer? Sachi decided he was going to work even harder. He was going to save every coin he could. Maybe if he tried really hard, he could give Akumar the wedding of her dreams. In the days that followed, Sachi worked from sunrise to sunset. He barely saw Akumar except when he dropped her off and picked her up from school. But he didn't care. All he wanted was to see Akumar happy. One day, when he picked Akumar up from school, Sachi saw her talking to a man he didn't know. The man was well dressed and drove an expensive car. Sachi felt a pang of worry. When Akumar got into the taxi, Sachi asked who the man was. That's Michael, Akumar said. He's a friend of mine. He was telling me about there's a party going on this weekend. Sachi tried to smile, but her heart was heavy. He saw how Akumar's eyes lit up when she talked about Michael and the party. That night, Sachi couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about Akumar, about Michael, about the life he wanted to give his bride. I'll make it, Sachi said to himself. I'll make Akumar happy no matter what. But even as he said this, Sachi felt that something was changing. Something he couldn't control, no matter how hard he worked. Akumar looked at the mirror and sighed. She was getting ready to go to dinner with Michael. His heart was beating fast, but it wasn't with joy. It was fear and doubt. Michael had called earlier that day. His voice was soft and gentle on the phone. Akumar, he said, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I know a beautiful restaurant. Akumar hesitated. She thought about Sachi, how hard he worked every day. But then she remembered the wedding she had seen, the pretty clothes, the sparkling jewelry. Okay, she replied softly. I go. Now, as he was getting ready, Akumar felt a weight on his chest. She knew she shouldn't go. Sachi loved her so much. But part of her wanted to see what a different life would be like. Akumar took the bus to the restaurant. When he arrived, he was out of breath. The place was beautiful, with bright lights and soft music. Michael was waiting at the door. He smiled when he saw Akumar. You look beautiful, he said. Akumar blushed. She wasn't used to praise like that. Inside the restaurant, Akumar looked at everything with wide eyes. The tables had white tablecloths and candles. The plates were made of fine china. Do you like the place? Michael asked. Akumar nodded, speechless. It was so different from the simple places she went with Sachi. During dinner, Michael talked about his life. He had a big company and traveled a lot. Akumar listened, fascinated. It was a world so different from yours. Akumar, Michael said suddenly, have you ever thought about traveling? About seeing new places? Akumar lowered his eyes. I've never left town, she said softly. Michael smiled. I could show you the world, Akumar. Paris, New York, Tokyo. Just imagine. Akumar's heart beat faster. She imagined herself in big cities, seeing things she had only seen in photos. But then she thought of Sachi. How he saved every coin to pay for his studies. How he waited for her every day at the school door. I don't know, Akumar said. I have my studies and Sachi. Michael took Akumar's hand. Think about it, Akumar. You deserve a better life. I can give it to you. Akumar felt his cheeks get hot. She pulled her hand back. I need to go, she said, getting up quickly. Thanks for dinner. Akumar left the restaurant with a heavy heart. She took the bus back home, looking out the window and seeing nothing. At home, Akumar found Sachi waiting for her. He looked tired but smiled when he saw her. How was your day, my love? Sachi asked. Akumar felt a pang of guilt. It was good, she lied. Sachi took something from his pocket. It was a small box. Akumar, he said, kneeling down. Will you marry me? Akumar looked at the simple ring in the box. It was beautiful, but so different from the jewelry she had seen at the restaurant with Michael. I need to think, Akumar said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Sachi's smile disappeared. He looked hurt and confused. Think? He asked. But weren't we planning on that? Akumar felt tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Sachi. I just need some time. She ran to her room, leaving Sachi alone and sad in the room. That night, Akumar couldn't sleep. She thought about Sachi, about Michael, about the life she had and the life she could have. In the morning, Akumar decided that she needed to be honest with Sachi. She found him in the kitchen making coffee. Sachi, she said, we need to talk. Sachi looked at her, her eyes filled with sadness. Is it about last night? Akumar nodded. Sachi, I met someone. The words seemed to hurt Sachi like knives. He dropped the coffee cup on the floor. Anyone? He asked, his voice shaking. Who? Akumar told him about Michael, about dinner, about the promises of a better life. Every word seemed to break a piece of Sachi's heart. But what about us? Sachi asked. Our plans, our dreams? Akumar looked at the ground. I don't know anymore, Sachi. I'm confused. Sachi took Akumar's hands. Akumar, please. I love you. I will work more, save more. We can have a better life together. Akumar released Sachi's hands. I need time, Sachi. To think, to decide. She grabbed a suitcase and started putting some clothes inside. Sachi watched, not believing what was happening. Where are you going? He asked. To my mother's house, Akuzia replied. Just for a while. When Akumar walked out the door, Sachi felt like her world was falling apart. He stood in the room, looking at the engagement ring that Akumar hadn't accepted. Outside, Akumar cried as he walked down the street. She didn't know what to do. Her heart was torn between Sachi's sure love and the promise of a new life with Michael. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky pink and orange. Akumar looked up, wishing someone could tell him what to do. But she knew it was her decision. And that decision would change his life forever. Sachi woke up early, as he always did. But today, he didn't want to get out of bed. His heart hurt so much. Akumar was gone, and he didn't know if she would come back. He looked at the empty spot next to him on the bed. He remembered every morning he woke up and saw Akumar's smiling face. Now there was only a cold pillow. Sachi stood up slowly. He had to work. The bills kept coming just because he was sad. In the taxi, Sachi wasn't humming like before. He drove in silence, his sad eyes looking at the street. Sometimes he thought he saw Akumar on the sidewalk. But it was never her. One day, a customer got into Sachi's taxi. He was a well-dressed man with a shiny watch. Sachi recognized the man from the photos Akumar had shown. It was Michael. "Where to, sir?" Sachi asked, trying to hide the sadness in her voice. Michael gave the address of a fancy restaurant. While driving, Sachi heard Michael talking on the phone. "Yes, honey," Michael would say. "I'll pick you up at 8. Put on that red dress I gave you." Sachi felt her heart sink. He knew Michael was talking to Akumar. When they arrived at the restaurant, Michael got out of the taxi. Before leaving, he looked at Sachi. "Thanks for the race," Michael said. "Oh, and if you know Akumar, tell her she made the right choice." Sachi stood still, watching Michael enter the restaurant. He wanted to scream, he wanted to cry. But he couldn't. He had to keep working. That night, Sachi couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Akumar with Michael. How happy she must be now, with pretty clothes and dinners at fancy restaurants. The next day, Sachi was so sad that she didn't pay attention to the street. Your taxi crashed into another car. No one was hurt, but the taxi was badly damaged. The owner of the taxi company was angry with Sachi. "You're fired," he said. Sachi walked home. He no longer had work. There was no more Akumar. He sat on the living room floor and cried. Meanwhile, Akumar was at Michael's house. She looked out the window, seeing the city below. Everything looked so beautiful from up there. Michael entered the room. He hugged Akumar from behind. "Are you happy here, my love?" he asked. Akumar smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, Michael. It's beautiful here." But deep in his heart, Akumar missed something. She missed Sachi's gentle smile, the way he held her hand. One day, Akumar decided to visit his mother, Asaba. When she arrived at the simple house where she grew up, Akumar saw that her mother didn't seem happy to see her. "Why did you do this, Akumar?" Asaba asked. "Sachi loved you so much." Akumar felt tears in his eyes. "I just wanted a better life, Mom." Asaba shook his head. "A better life? And what is a better life, daughter? Money? Expensive clothes? Or true love?" His mother's words stuck in Akumar's head. She returned to Michael's apartment, but now everything seemed different. Beautiful things no longer shined so much. One day, Akumar was walking down the street when he saw Sachi. He was sitting on a park bench, looking sad and tired. Akumar wanted to run to him, hug him, apologize. But she couldn't. She had made her choice. People in the city started talking about Akumar. They said bad things, called her bad names. Akumar felt more and more alone. One night, Akumar was walking home when a man stopped her on the street. He yelled at her, saying horrible things. Akumar was very scared. When she got home, shaking and crying, Michael wasn't there. He had gone traveling for work. Akumar sat on the bathroom floor and cried for hours. She thought about Sachi. How he was always there when she needed him. How he made her feel safe and loved. Akumar took out a paper and a pen. She started to write a letter. A letter to Sachi, to her mother, to everyone she had hurt. "Forgive me," she wrote. "I made a terrible mistake. Tears fell onto the paper as Akumar wrote. She knew she had hurt a lot of people. She had hurt Sachi, who only wanted to love her. She had hurt her mother, who only wanted the best for her. When he finished writing, Akumar looked out the window. The sun was rising, painting the sky with beautiful colors. But Akumar didn't see the beauty. She only saw the darkness in her heart. She took the letter and left the apartment. Akumar didn't know where he was going. She just knew she couldn't stay there. As he walked through the city streets, Akumar thought about everything that had happened. How she had thrown away true love for a life that seemed bright but was empty inside. The sun was rising in the sky, but to Akumar, everything seemed dark. She had made bad choices, and now she didn't know how to fix things. Akumar reached a bridge. She stopped and looked at the water below. For a moment, she thought maybe she could this ends all the pain right there. But then she remembered Sachi's kind face. From your mother's love. And Akumar knew he had to be strong. She had to try to fix the things she had broken. With tears in his eyes, Akumar began walking back to the city. She didn't know what the future would bring. But she knew she had to try to make things right now. The day was just beginning, and Akumar knew he had a long way to go. A path of repentance, of forgiveness, and perhaps, if she was lucky, of redemption. The sun was rising when Sachi woke up. He hadn't slept well. His dreams were full of sadness. Sachi got up slowly and went to the kitchen to make some tea. As the water boiled, Sachi heard someone knocking on the door. He opened it, thinking maybe it was his neighbor. But it wasn't. It was Akumar's mother, Asaba. Sachi, Asaba said, her voice shaking. Something terrible has happened. Sachi felt her heart sink. What's wrong, Asaba? Asaba handed a paper to Sachi. It was a letter. The lyrics were by Akumar. She's gone, Sachi, Asaba said, starting to cry. Sachi read the letter with shaking hands. Akumar had written that she was sorry. That he had made a big mistake. And that he couldn't live with the guilt. Sachi felt as if the world had stopped. Akumar, his Akumar, had decided to leave forever. She had taken her own life. No, Sachi whispered. It can't be true. But it was true. Akumar had jumped from a bridge the night before. Some people had seen it and called the police. But it was too late. Sachi and Asaba cried together. They hugged each other, feeling the pain of loss. Akumar had been so important to both of them. In the days that followed, many people came to see Sachi and Asaba. They brought food and words of comfort. But nothing seemed to help. Sachi couldn't stop thinking about Akumar. How alone and sad she must have felt. He wished he had been there for her, to tell her everything would be okay. One day, when Sachi was sitting on the balcony, he saw a man approaching. It was Michael. Sachi felt angry when she saw Michael. He wanted to scream, wanted to blame Michael for everything that had happened. But when Michael got closer, Sachi saw that he was sad too. Sachi, Michael said softly. I'm very sorry. Sachi looked at Michael. He saw that the man who had seemed so strong and confident now looked small and scared. I didn't know, Michael continued. I didn't know Akumar was so sad. I should have known. Sachi wanted to be angry. I wanted to blame Michael. But he remembered the words of Akumar's letter. She had asked for forgiveness. She didn't want people to be angry. Michael, Sachi said slowly. We both loved Akumar. And now she's gone. Michael nodded, tears in his eyes. I wish I could go back. Do things differently. Sachi looked up at the sky. It was blue and clean, just the way Akumar liked it. We can't go back, he said. But we can learn from this. Michael and Sachi sat in silence for a while. They thought of Akumar, of how she had touched their lives. After Michael left, Sachi went to the room. He took out a box where he kept special things. Inside were photos of Akumar. There was the ring he had bought to propose to her. Sachi looked at these things and cried. He cried for Akumar, for the life they could have had together. He cried for all the things he wished he had said to her. But as she cried, Sachi remembered something her grandmother always said. She said that true love never dies. That even when people leave, love remains. Sachi picked up a photo of Akumar smiling. He looked at her smile, at her sparkling eyes. And he felt something shift inside him. He realized that being angry, being sad forever, was not going to bring Akumar back. That wasn't what she would have wanted. Sachi decided that she would honor Akumar's memory in a different way. He was going to live the life she couldn't live. He was going to help people who needed it, like Akumar always wanted to do. The next day, Sachi went to the hospital where Akumar was studying to be a nurse. He spoke to the director and asked if he could help in any way. The director was surprised but happy. He said the hospital always needed volunteers to help patients. Sachi started going to the hospital every day. He talked to patients, read stories to sick children, helped nurses with small things. Little by little, Sachi felt that he was doing something good. Something Akumar would have liked. One day, while Sachi was in the hospital, he met a girl named Mira. Mira was sick and needed to stay in the hospital for a long time. Sachi started visiting Mira every day. He told her stories, made her laugh. And little by little, Sachi felt her heart becoming lighter. Mira reminded Sachi of Akumar. Not because they looked alike, but because Mira had the same bright smile, the same desire to help others. One day, Mira asked Sachi why he always looked a little sad. Sachi thought for a moment. Then he told Mira about Akumar. He talked about how they loved each other, about how Akumar wanted to be a nurse to help people. Mira listened to everything carefully. When Sachi finished, she took his hand. "Sachi," Mira said, "Akumar must be very proud of you right now." Sachi felt tears in her eyes. But for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of hope. That night, Sachi looked up at the starry sky. He thought about Akumar, about everything that had happened. "Akumar," he said softly, "I forgive you. And I hope you can forgive me too." Sachi felt a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult. That there would be sad days, days when he would miss Akumar terribly. But he also knew he could go on living. That I could honor Akumar's memory by helping others, by being kind, by spreading love. The sun began to rise, painting the sky with beautiful colors. Sachi smiled. It was a new day. A day to remember, to forgive, and to move forward. Sachi knew that Akumar would always be in her heart. And with that love, he could do good things in the world. Things that would make Akumar smile, wherever she was right now.